Hey people, I don't know about your accounts, but wow, my portfolio has been hammered these past couple of days. I woke up yesterday, every single thing I owned was in the red, bar one telco, and positions in mining stocks absolutely hammered, like 6-7% down at market open. Now, a younger me would have been panicking. Actually, a much younger me would have had stop losses on all of my positions, like every single position, because I was so paranoid about losing gains. And of course, what I'd probably see is that as I'd constantly sell out of positions, I'd find that they were actually trending upwards, but I was out of the market at that point. So you see the short-term thinking, lack of conviction, not really knowing why I was invested in certain companies, that was my enemy. It wasn't the stock market, it was my state of mind. So when I was greeted by a sea of red yesterday, I leaned on my past experiences to help guide me through what I know is a rough period now, and it's going to continue to be a rough period for probably weeks and months to come. And yes, markets opened in some places green today, but I know, and maybe you know, we haven't seen the end of the bear. Now, I've been through a number of investing rough patches, starting with the dot-com crash. And back then I was quite young, I didn't have much invested, but a high proportion of my wealth was in equities because I didn't have much money. So, every penny counts. It still does, to be fair. And I was basically 100% following tips. My research consisted actually of which tips I was going to follow. It sounds crazy and stupid now saying it out loud, but that's how I was behaving back then. I was not doing my own research, I was following what other people were telling me. And as a result of that and having limited conviction, I didn't really know what was going on. When things turned sour, I inevitably sold out of the market. Sometimes it was the right call by luck. Often it was the wrong call and I ended up over time losing money. Now, the tips I was following back then were all part of the bubble because that was what was hot. And when the bubble popped, I lost a lot of money. Now, it didn't end well, as my first experience of the stock market, it wasn't great, but at least I had the presence of mind to know why I was losing money. I realized that I was basically gambling. I wasn't investing at all. And I know that gamblers over time lose money. Fast forward 7 or 8 years, and then we have the credit crunch. Now, I thought I'd learned my lesson from the past, so I tried to take advantage of market volatility because I knew what was going to happen as part of that volatility. There'd be winners, there'd be losers. But again, I didn't know what I was doing. I started day trading. I was absolutely terrible at day trading and I lost a lot of money. But again, I stored some pearls of wisdom up here because they were expensive lessons, but they were lessons all the same. Now on to the next major drop, and this time my portfolio was rocked by COVID, as many people's portfolios were rocked by COVID. However, unlike previously, I didn't do anything other than add to holdings I thought would come out of the crisis in a strong position. And by this point, I was actually largely in index funds anyway. I'd learnt my lessons in the previous years and I didn't buy stocks, or I hadn't bought stocks that I hadn't researched for myself. Ultimately, just because something was on a bull run and people were hyping the stock, it didn't mean that I was going to buy in. So I didn't have any stocks that I had no conviction against, that I knew what I was invested in, I knew why I was invested in it. And when things turned sour very quickly, as they did, as the markets dropped through COVID, I didn't sell. And if I thought there was an opportunity, I actually added to my positions. Now, in fact, the most exciting thing I probably did at that time was change from one provider to another provider because they had no trading fees, and in terms of the ISA or the cost of the ISA, it was cheaper than my current provider. So that was the major change that I made during COVID. I didn't sell stocks, I didn't take any major losses or crystallize any major losses, and everything was fine. COVID is still a horrible scourge on the planet, but my portfolio had a little wobble, but then kept rolling forward. But now we've got this cocktail of portfolio destruction. Russia sanctions, there's an expectation of a prolonged conflict with the Ukraine. China's COVID lockdowns continuing and getting more restrictive, and that's slowing the growth in other markets. And of course, that injects a lot of fear across financial markets. Supply chains are breaking all over the place. Recession is certainly closing in all around us, and the bear does seem to have the bull by the horns. So this must be different, right? This must be the time to sell up and just sit out of the market. What do you think? Well, I can't give you advice. I'm not qualified to give advice. And even if I were, without knowing your personal circumstances, my words would just be hollow. But I can say this, practically every crash feels like this is the one to change markets. This is the one that's different from all of the others. And across history, what we can see is that they don't. People continue to adapt to the changes, businesses innovate, markets continue to grow, and patient investors make money. So for me, it's relatively simple. Stay the course, remain invested in either markets as a basket of securities, such as index funds, or individual stocks that I feel are positioned to change the world and have established a moat around their business. Now, with that mindset, I find that I'm generally a lot happier with my investments, because when the markets are up, my portfolio is up, and who doesn't like to see green across the portfolio? When markets are down, and I mean very down like they were yesterday, in some cases they are today, then I see that as a buying opportunity, and who doesn't like to buy things when they're on sale? Now, to be fair, I've got a long enough time horizon for that to make sense to me. So even if this bear market does continue for a number of years, I'm simply winding up my portfolio to the point, like a coiled spring, that when markets return to growth, my growth explodes with it, because I've been piling into my portfolio during these subdued months and maybe even years. And I think that my conviction and consistency of investment, dollar cost averaging basically, I think that'll be rewarded over time. There is a caveat though, and that's, as I said, that is that I've got a long enough time horizon for that to make sense to me. If I needed cash today, as in I can't afford to keep my money locked away in investments, then I would be approaching things differently. First and foremost, I'd be getting my house in order. So what does that mean? Well, I'd be limiting expenses, and I've spoken in a previous video, which I'll link up there. I spoke about fixing my mortgage rate, and I advised that, or I suggested that people might want to fix their mortgage rates too, because banks back then I thought were going to increase rates, which they have done. So if I hadn't have locked in my mortgage rate, fixed it at that time, that's exactly what I'll be doing right now to give me that clarity of expenditure. I'd also be taking care to minimize my day-to-day expenses. So I'd be eating out less, I'd be watching the bills, I'd be cutting out spend for things that's not needed, Disney Plus, Netflix, and we've seen other people doing that with Netflix, haven't we? I was going to say Amazon Prime, but Amazon Prime's a really good deal with the free deliveries and the entertainment bundles. But in a real pinch, as much as I'd like Amazon Prime, that'd be gone as well. Because what I'd be doing is taking the time to track my spending, write it down, avoid guesswork, and instead I'd be using specifics, and I'd be quite ruthless about what I cut. If you don't write it down, you don't capture everything, and if you don't capture everything, you'll make assumptions. And once you start to make those assumptions, you won't control your finances properly. So that'd be my approach. I'd really understand what am I spending, what do I need to spend, and where can I make cuts. Once my cost of living was down to a level that, it's as low as I think I could possibly get it, next on the list would be deciding how I fund those expenditures. Can I cover them all with my income, or do I need to increase my income? And if I do need to make more money, where can I get that from? Do I need to set up some side hustles, take on an extra job, do some part-time work? And it would only be after I've exhausted all of those possibilities that I'd then consider selling my investments. And even then, I'd have to go through my emergency fund first, because the emergency fund is essentially there to protect me from selling long-term investments because of short-term pain. And that's particularly important to me because I've got my investments mainly within a stocks and shares ISA. So taking funds out of the ISA kills all future tax advantages for that money. I'll never get that tax advantage back on the money that I take out of the ISA. So when I do take money out, it will definitely be, hopefully, on my individual terms, and you're not influenced by market conditions. So there it is, a relatively short video because I woke up yesterday I saw my portfolio was deeply in the red. And whilst I no longer get emotional about that sort of portfolio destruction, I know that in my early investing days, I would have been bouncing between panic and fear and eventually regret, because I'd have definitely made stupid decisions and sold out of positions that I probably shouldn't have done, bought things that I definitely shouldn't have done. And I wish someone had just sat me down, explained why the world wasn't ending because the stock market was red on that particular day or that particular month, and just calmed my nerves basically. So this video helps just one person to take a step back, consider their investments objectively, and then make rational decisions about whether to buy, sell, or hold. Then I'll be happy. If you've enjoyed this video, please slap the like button, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and if you're the kind of person that sees markets in the red and gets excited about the opportunities that will uncover, then check out this video which shares Warren Buffett's thoughts on super investors. Maybe you're one of them. Until next time, peace.